Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm showing you something that most people walk right past without a second thought. 8 Canadian nickels, just 5 cents each. But don't let that fool you. These tiny coins carry over 150 years of Canadian history, a queen's 70-year reign, and one of the biggest changes in Canadian currency in modern times. From 2002 all the way to 2016, every single one of these coins has its own story to tell. Whether you're a serious collector or just someone who loves history and hidden stories, you're going to want to stick around for this one. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's get into it. Most people never actually look at their coins. They pull them out of their pockets, toss them on the counter, and forget about them. But if you stop and really look at the 2002 Canadian nickel, something stands out. This wasn't just another year at the Royal Canadian Mint. This was the year Queen Elizabeth II reached her golden jubilee. 50 full years on the throne. She had been queen since 1952, and half a century later, Canada was marking that milestone in every way it could, including on its smallest coins. Some versions of the 2002 nickel carry a dual date, 1952, 2002, 2 years stamped on one coin. That one small detail changes everything. It's no longer just a 5-cent piece. It's a commemorative, a record, a tiny metal document that says, this woman has been your queen for 50 years. Now here's something most people don't know. This coin is not silver. It's not even really nickel, despite the name. Since 1999, Canada switched its 5-cent coins to a steel core with nickel plating over the top. Cheaper to produce, similar appearance. The trade-off is there's no precious metal value here at all. What you're holding is worth exactly what the story and conditions say it's worth. And the 2002 coin has plenty of story. The front shows Queen Elizabeth II's portrait, surrounded by the words Elizabeth II DG Regina. That's Latin for Dei Gratia Regina, meaning by the grace of God, Queen. Those words have appeared on Canadian coins for generations, quietly connecting every person who holds one to a constitutional history most of them never think about. Flip it over and you get the beaver, Canada's national animal, sitting on a log, in a design created by sculptor Emmanuel Han way back in 1937. Canada at the top, 5 cents at the bottom, the year clearly stamped. This design has been on the 5-cent coin for nearly 90 years now and shows no signs of going anywhere. Here's the part that hits different now. Queen Elizabeth II passed away in September 2022. King Charles III's face is on new Canadian coins. That means every coin with Elizabeth's portrait on it belongs to a chapter of history that is permanently closed. You cannot make another one. The era is done. The 2002 nickel, with its golden jubilee dual date, is the oldest coin in this collection. It opened a decade and a half of history that we're walking through today. And knowing what we know now about how her reign ended, about how those coins will never be made again, this little 5-cent piece carries a weight that has nothing to do with its face value. Don't spend this one. Here's part 2 fully written with the same hook, story flow, and energy. Hashtag part 2, the 2004 Canadian nickel. Hashtag the coin with the secret mark most people never. Notice, here's a question for you. How many times have you looked at a coin and actually studied it? Not just glanced at it, but really looked. Because if you have a 2004 Canadian nickel sitting around right now, there's a good chance you've been missing something. Something small. Something most people walk right past. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Look at the front of the coin, right near Queen Elizabeth II's portrait. Look closely. There's a tiny letter P. That single letter is the entire story of this coin. The Royal Canadian Mint added that P mark to some 2004 nickels to indicate that the coin used purified nickel plating in its production process. On the surface, that sounds like a boring technical detail, a manufacturing footnote. But in the world of coin collecting, details like this are everything. Because that mark makes 2004 a 2-variety year. You have the regular 2004 nickel, and you have the 2004 P. Same year, same design, 2 completely different coins in the eyes of a serious collector. People building complete Canadian variety sets need both. The 2004 P shows up specifically listed in numismatic catalogs. Dealers watch for it. Collectors put it on their want lists. And the average person has never once noticed it was there. Go check your change jar right now. Seriously. If you have a 2004 nickel in there, pull it out and look near the portrait. You might be holding a variety that most people threw away without a second thought. Neither version is rare in the traditional sense. Millions of both were struck. But rarity and significance are two different things. The 2004 P has a legitimacy to it that common date coins just don't have. In high-grade uncirculated condition, it carries a small premium. Even in circulated condition, it's a more interesting piece than it looks. Now, the portrait on this coin is worth talking about too. The obverse features the Dora de Pedery Hunt portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, which had been in use since 1990. This version shows the Queen wearing a crown, a more formal and traditional look. Compare that to the Susanna Blunt portrait that arrived in 2003, which showed an uncrowned queen with just a simple necklace. The 2004 coin sits right at that crossover point in Canadian coin portraiture, which gives it a subtle historical layer most people never think about. Flip it over, and it's the classic hand beaver. Canada 5 cents 2004 stamped cleanly on the back. Nothing unusual there. The reverse keeps it simple. All the action on this coin is on the front, hidden in plain sight in one tiny letter that most people have spent their whole lives ignoring. This coin is a reminder that the most interesting things are often the ones you almost missed. A single letter. A small mark. A detail so easy to overlook that millions of people already have. Don't be one of them. Let me set the scene for you. It's 2008. Lehman Brothers, one of the most powerful investment banks in the world, has just collapsed. Not struggling. Not restructuring. Gone. Over 100 years of history wiped out in a single weekend. Stock markets are in freefall. Retirement accounts that took decades to build are losing half their value in weeks. Governments that had never bailed out private companies in their entire history are suddenly writing blank checks just to keep the system from completely falling apart. People are scared. Not stock market is down scared. Genuinely, deeply scared. The kind of scared where you start wondering if the ATM is going to work tomorrow morning. This is the world the 2008 Canadian nickel was born into. And here's what makes that remarkable. The Royal Canadian Mint never stopped. No emergency shutdown. No production halt. No announcement that coins would be delayed while the world figured out what was happening. The Mint showed up, did its job, and struck the 2008 nickel in normal quantities like any other year. Because that's what currency production does. It doesn't panic. It doesn't react to headlines. It just keeps going. There's something quietly powerful about that. When everything around it was chaos, this coin was made with the same precision, the same specifications, the same steady hand as every coin before it. Steel core, nickel plating, 21.2 mm diameter, 3.95 grams. Exactly what it was supposed to be. Canada itself held up better than most countries during this crisis. Canadian banks had tighter regulations and far less exposure to the toxic mortgage securities that destroyed institutions across the United States and Europe. The damage was real. Nobody escaped clean. But Canada's foundation held when others cracked. The 2008 nickel is in some ways a small symbol of that resilience. The front of the coin carries the Susanna Blunt portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, introduced in 2003. What makes this portrait different from earlier ones is that the Queen appears without a crown. No formal regalia, just a simple necklace and a calm, composed expression. Elizabeth II DG Regina arcs around her. For a coin struck during one of the most anxious years in modern financial history, there's something fitting about a portrait that looks completely unbothered. The back is the hand beaver, same as it's been since 1937. Canada 5 cents 2008, clearly stamped. Unchanged, unshaken, exactly where it's always been. Now here's a detail that almost feels like a joke. In 2008, the price of actual nickel metal hit record highs. The commodity boom that preceded the crash had driven raw nickel to some of its most expensive levels ever. and Canadian nickels at that point contained almost no real nickel. The steel core and thin plating meant the actual metal value of the coin was well below 5 cents. The coin, named after one of the most expensive metals on Earth, was worth less in metal than it was in currency. Not that it matters, since melting Canadian coins is illegal. But still, you can't make that up. No rare varieties came out of 2008. No famous errors. No special mint marks. Just a clean, well-struck coin from a year that shook the entire financial world. Most people who handled this coin in 2008 were too worried about their mortgage or their retirement fund to give it a second thought. But you're giving it one now. And that's exactly the point. The coin from the year Canada killed the penny. Something died in 2012. Not a person, not a company. Something smaller than that, and in some ways more personal. Something that had been part of Canadian daily life for longer than anyone alive could remember. Something that had passed through the hands of every single Canadian who had ever bought anything, ever received change, ever dropped a coin on the floor and decided it wasn't worth picking up. The penny died in 2012. Not officially, not yet. The last penny wouldn't roll off the production line until 2013. But the decision was made in the March 2012 federal budget, and once that announcement landed, everyone knew it was over. The 1 cent coin, a fixture of Canadian commerce since 1858, was being retired. Over 150 years of history, gone. The government's reasoning was straightforward. It cost more than a cent to make a cent. It slowed down transactions. People weren't even using them anymore, just throwing them in jars or leaving them on counters. The math didn't work. The penny was done. And the 2012 nickel was struck in the last year Canada still officially had one. Think about what that means for a second. This coin existed in a Canada that still had a penny. The very next year, that would no longer be true. The 2012 nickel stands right at the edge of that line. 1 foot in the old system. 1 foot pointed towards something Canada had never actually experienced before. A country without its smallest coin. Because here's what most people didn't fully think through when the penny disappeared. The nickel didn't just survive the penny's retirement. It inherited the penny's job. Overnight, the 5-cent coin became Canada's lowest denomination. The floor of the entire currency system. Cash transactions started rounding to the nearest 5 cents. A system borrowed from countries like Sweden and New Zealand that had already gone through the same thing. Prices ending in 1 or 2 cents round down. Prices ending in 3 or 4 cents round up. Only for cash, not cards or digital payments, but still. The rules of Canadian commerce quietly rewrote themselves, and the nickel was at the center of it. The coin that most people barely noticed suddenly mattered more than it ever had. Physically, the 2012 nickel looks exactly like every other modern Canadian nickel. Steel core, nickel plating, 21.2 mm diameter, 3.95 grams. Susanna Blunt's uncrowned Queen Elizabeth II on the front with Elizabeth II DG Regina. Emmanuel Hans Beaver on the back with Canada 5 cents 2012. No special marking, no commemorative design, no visible sign that this was a coin struck at a historic turning point. That's the thing about transition coins. They rarely announce themselves. They just show up, do their job, and let history decide what they meant. For collectors who focus on Canadian monetary history, the 2012 nickel is a key piece. Not because it's rare, not because it's valuable in any traditional sense, but because of the story it carries. The last nickel before Canada crossed into post-penny territory. The last coin of its kind to exist alongside the cent it was about to outlive. The penny had been around for 154 years. It had survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the transition from the British pound to the Canadian dollar, and decades of inflation that made it worth less and less with every passing year. And in the end, it wasn't any of those big dramatic forces that finished it off. It was just math. Simple, cold, unavoidable math. The penny lost, the nickel won, and this coin was there the moment it happened. Remember that date. Because on that specific day, something happened that no living Canadian had ever experienced before. The Royal Canadian Mint made its last penny distribution. Banks stopped ordering them. The copper-colored 1-cent coin that had been in Canadian pockets, purses, parking meters, and piggy banks since 1858 was being pulled from the system for good. No announcement on the front page of every newspaper. No national moment of silence. Just a quiet administrative decision that changed the way Canadian money worked forever. The penny was gone, and it was never coming back. Now here's where the 2013 nickel steps into the story. This coin is the first 5-cent piece ever struck in Canada without a penny. That's not a small distinction. That's a genuine historical first. For 155 years, the penny had always been there, sitting below the nickel in the currency hierarchy, handling the smallest transactions, absorbing the rounding that every day. Prices required, and then suddenly it wasn't. The nickel was now at the bottom, alone. The foundation of the entire Canadian cash system resting on a coin that most people had spent their whole lives treating as an afterthought. Think about what that actually felt like on the ground in 2013. You walk into a convenience store. You buy something. The total comes to $2.03. In 2012, you would have gotten 3 pennies back with your change. In 2013, you got nothing. The register rounded down to $2 and that was it. Some stores put up little signs explaining the rounding rules. Some cashiers had to explain it to confused customers. Some people thought they were being shortchanged. Others didn't even notice. But whether people noticed or not, the system had changed permanently, and every nickel in circulation, including every 2013 nickel the mint was striking, was now operating in that new reality. The nickel wasn't just surviving the penny's absence, it was filling the gap the penny left behind. Every cash transaction that used to end with pennies now ended with nickels or nothing. The 5-cent coin quietly absorbed the responsibility it had never had to carry before. And the 2013 nickel was the first of its kind to be born into that responsibility from day one. Physically, the coin is unchanged from the years before it. Steel core, nickel plating, standard dimensions and weight. Susanna Blunt's uncrowned Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse with Elizabeth II, DG Regina. The 1937 hand beaver on the reverse with Canada 5 cents 2013. Clean, consistent, familiar. Nothing on the surface of this coin tells you that anything is different about the world it was minted into. But everything was different. There's one more layer to this coin that most people don't know about. 2013 was the 60th anniversary of Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. She was crowned on June 2nd, 1953, making 2013 the Diamond Jubilee of her coronation. The mint released some special collector pieces to mark the occasion. The regular circulation nickels carried no special marking for it, but the coincidence is worth noting. The year Canada's currency changed forever was also the year the woman on every Canadian coin celebrated 60 years of being its queen. 2 historic milestones, 1 tiny coin, neither one visible to the eye unless you already know the story. That's what makes the 2013 nickel one of the most layered pieces in this entire collection. On the surface, it looks like nothing. Underneath, it carries the weight of a country stepping into monetary territory it had never been in before, with a queen on its face who had been watching over Canadian currency longer than most Canadians had been alive. This is not a coin you spend. This is a coin you keep and explain to people.